You've probably seen the advertisements pop up on your smartphone, or maybe your social media feed. In short, the game is an online multiplayer survivalist where players of up to 10 are randomly assigned to either be crew members or imposters. The goal depends on which side of the game you're on. As a crew member, you work to save your fellow mates and stop the imposters, while the opposite is true for the other team. They will sabotage you and kill as many crew members discreetly as possible. As simple as it sounds, the game is highly addictive and has recently risen to popularity in the YouTube and Twitch community due to the pandemic lockdown. I'm hoping thanks to its popularity, I can get the word out about what the game is really. Because even though the short simulation is harmless fun, what myself and 6 other astronauts faced was not. As impossible as it sounds, this is our story. 2016. We were told that we were going to be on the space station for approximately 2 weeks, no more and no less. Jansen was given supplies and asked to stock the pantry for the flight. Manchez and Angelo were in charge of maintenance and engineering. Colleen, the only female of the group, was given the job of medical records, while Hans, myself, and Jonas were in charge of piloting and communications. I have trained my whole life for an opportunity like this, so needless to say, I was more than excited to shoot for the stars. I had never met any of them before that day, and didn't really pay much attention to any of them, to be honest. We were all here for different reasons, and it didn't concern me so long as we did our jobs. The launch and arrival to the station were nothing special. We met with the old crew and started going over the tasks that we would have during our mission. Comet HB 456 is projected across the threshold in approximately 3 days. Our main concern is to document and retrieve as much data as possible from it, as it is still unclassified. Along with that, routine maintenance and adjustments to exterior paneling will be made, Manchez explained. He appointed himself as commander based on his years of seniority, and none of us objected. Once the old crew was gone, we began to document all of these supplies that were still on board to make sure they matched with the record. I joined Hans and Johnson near the command center to check logs and instruments. It was here that we noticed our first discrepancy. Has anyone accessed the logs yet? Jansen asked as he reviewed everything. Not that I'm aware of. Why? I asked, glancing over at his screen. The entire database was blank. Is that normal? Jansen asked us, but I honestly didn't know. Hans only shrugged, not being able to speak much English. If their mission was classified, it is. A voice chimed in from the doorway. Colleen had been standing there listening to us. Well, I guess we should program the system to do the same for us once we head home, Jansen decided, thinking little of it. It bothers me to think that we could so easily fall into a trap. But this is what happens when people learn to trust each other. Later that same day, Jonas and Johnson were prepping for the first heavy maintenance task outside the hull of the station. Use of these suits is going to be limited, so we need to move fast and be efficient, Jonas told me as he activated the exterior cameras. It was my job to watch the 2 of them as they crossed from the airlock over to the 3 loose panels. The job wasn't supposed to take over 45 minutes according to Jansen's calculations, and only provided a 13% window of error. Despite the risks, the 2 men suited up and left the relative safety of the station without any fanfare. Watching them cross into the emptiness of space reminded me of seeing old movies, the way the characters would glitch and jump a few seconds. I made a mental note to add the cameras to our maintenance list as I activated the comms and instructed the 2 of them to move east towards the panels. Static was the only reply that I got, but it at least confirmed they heard me. It seems like they left this place in a dump, a voice to my right said. Angelo sat down alongside me and let out a sigh before remarking, I guess this is what we get for being the cleanup crew. I remember that I was going to make a snappy joke, but then a loud burst of noise from the monitors caught my attention. The screen was glitching in and out of complete blackness, and I asked for either Johnson or Jonas to respond.
There's leak requesting airlock. Prepare.
The reply came in sporadic moments. Get the airlock open, something went wrong, Colleen ordered over the intercom. The screen became completely static after that as we scrambled to assist the two of them back inside. Angela was there first, quickly pressing in the correct sequence and standing back to allow for pressurization. The rest of us watched as Angela went into the next chamber to assist one of the two men inside the station, all of us holding our collective breath as we realized that he was returning alone. All that was left of the other astronaut was the dangling cord that had been used for suspension and oxygen. Once inside, the survivor took off his helmet and revealed himself. It was Jansen. Bloody pressure in that pipe nearly finished us both off. Rest in peace, he exclaimed as he showed the marks on the left side of his suit where the oxygen had burst against it, leaving a melted mess. Let me get a look at you, come on, Colleen suggested. The others assisted her to take Johnson toward the central hub of the station. I was focusing on the suspension cord and wondering why the break looked like it had been made by a clean cut. After confirming that Jansen had sustained no major injuries, Colleen made the recommendation that we prepare a meal and also have a short service on behalf of Jonas. Although none of us truly knew each other, it seemed like the appropriate thing to do. So, Angelo and I prepared a small meal and we convened in the rec room about a half hour later. Even in the midst of the low gravity, Colleen was able to make a short toast to our fallen comrade and commented, "This accident just goes to show how diligent we all need to be. Not one of us is safe from the mistakes that we make, or from whatever else might be in disrepair aboard this station. We need to watch each other's backs like family." It was a good warning. The rest of us cheered and drank up, using the pressurized room to take off our suits and enjoy the meal. Roast and shepherd's pie, a classic that I knew from home, was the food of choice, and Hans wasted no time digging in, shouting something excitedly in his own tongue as he ate. "I'll drink to that," Jensen said with a chuckle as he tore off a bit of the roast. He was midway to chewing it when Colleen grabbed his hand. And then we noticed that Hans was not being excitable because of the meal. It was because he was choking. "Oh, holy crap," Colleen said as she rounded the room to try and check his airways. "Pass me that syringe," she ordered me. I was watching as Hans' eyes slowly bulged from his head, and his face began to swell. It would be a matter of seconds before he lost all oxygen, and two knew what the pressurization would do. I complied and I passed her the needle, and watched as she held the struggling man down and urged him to remain calm. Easier said than done given that he knew what was happening to him. Using the needle, she slammed the sharp edge into his lung to try and open a separate path from the air. But the rest of us could tell that it was too late. She was delaying the inevitable. Hans' gasps were the only sound in the room save for Colleen shouting for him to stay alive, but it was just a hollow attempt. Moments later, the room was silent again, and all of us were feeling very uncomfortable. The food was poisoned, Johnson realized. None of us acknowledged it, but we knew that he was right. Someone in this team was trying to kill the others. That evening, I did my best to get some sleep, despite the tension that remained amongst our small crew. It had only been a day and already two of us were gone, and of course I knew that the small panic I felt was likely creeping into the others' hearts. Our mission had a mole. I watched my door as I pretended to sleep, half worried that I would be next, and for good reason. Midway through the night, I heard a noise in the hallway and I went to investigate. The lights were dim, but I could make out Colleen's distinctive red hair. as I followed her slowly towards the rear of the station. Was she off to eliminate one of the remaining crew? It made a certain amount of sense given her experience in medicine, but for what purpose? I kept my own small tool in my hand clutched as I entered the storage room, prepared for the worst. Instead, I was surprised to find Colleen and Angelo were standing there waiting for me. "Close the door," Colleen ordered. We huddled near the pantry and I said, "You intended for me to follow you." "There's an imposter among us," the doctor said candidly. Angelo nodded grimly, and I knew what they both were thinking. "Jansen," I whispered. It might have been a coincidence that the accident happened while he was with Jonas, but the poisoning of the food can't be. He's the only one who has access to the pantry, she answered firmly. "With communication sketchy towards the surface, we're pretty much on our own up here," Angelo commented. 2 more weeks was a guaranteed death sentence, I realized. "Well, what do you propose?" I asked. It was obvious that we didn't need to debate the issue. I figured interrogation would allow for Jansen to confess, and then we could hold him in the brig for questioning. But our physician had other plans. "We need to eliminate him before he hurts the rest of us," she decided. The room fell silent. "You mean kill?" I realized grimly. "Would you rather wind up like Hans or Jonas?" she asked. I didn't have an argument for that, so instead, we agreed that now was the time to act. I can't properly describe the feeling you get when you realize that you have to kill another person, even if they are your enemy. It made my stomach twist in knots. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I could even go through with it, but Colin insisted we needed to move as one unit to prevent Jansen from causing any more harm. We traveled together across the station to his quarters, not a sound among us. I imagine the others were likely also contemplating what was about to happen, but none of us were really ready. Colleen entered first, moving to the left side of Jansen's slumbering form as she gestured for Angelo to take out his knife. The man's hands were shaking. I briefly wondered what Jansen might be dreaming about. I hoped it was good compared to the violent death that he faced. I quickly grabbed a hold of his arms and Colleen held his legs. Jansen only had time to wake up and scream. Angelo throttled him and held the knife right against his neck. For a split second, I was sure that he wouldn't be able to do it. As the blade crossed his main artery, I expected to see anger or resentment in his eyes, but all I saw was fear. He choked on his own blood as his legs and arms went limp. Once he was confirmed dead by Colleen, we shot his body out of the airlock and took stock of what we had left. "We need to see if we can repair these systems so we can contact HQ," she instructed. It wasn't going to be an easy job, but now that the imposter was gone, I thought that we would have smooth sailing. In hindsight, I should never have believed that we were safe or that Jansen worked alone. Over the next week, I got into a routine and I let my guard down. It never occurred to me that Colleen or Angelo might also be a threat. But 10 days into our mission, it became obvious again that something was amiss. "Did you turn off the cameras last night?" I asked as I checked the systems. They hadn't acted strangely since Jansen had left, and now all of a sudden, I wasn't able to view the east side of the station. It made me uneasy again. "I was asleep, so that's doubtful," Colleen commented as she checked it herself. "The dang things need to be overhauled," she muttered. Our assignment that day was the depressurization of the West Wing. I insisted that we all travel together. As we started to seal off the first chamber, Angelo sensed my unease and commented on it. "Is everything all right?" "Just keep moving," I insisted as I played through my head the events leading up to Jansen's death. Little details of how it occurred flashed across my subconscious. How Colleen had conveniently been in the command center when the cameras had gone out before. How she had known that the food was poison. But Jansen had been about to eat it, unaware. Why would he do that if he was trying to eliminate the rest of us? When Colleen first approached you about the imposter, did she explain how she knew it was Jansen? I asked him as we hurried to the next room. The physician wasn't far behind us. It was now or never. She told me that she noticed that Jonas's oxygen cord had been severed, and that was how she knew. Why? Immediately, I shut the chamber closed on Colleen and muttered, "We killed the wrong person." As the doctor arrived at the sealed door, her eyes widened in fear as she tried to shout to get our attention. Angela looked panicked as I struggled to explain what I knew. She is the only one who seems to be one step ahead of the rest of us, like she knew this whole time what to expect. Can you call that coincidence? I asked. You're being paranoid, he argued. The alarm told me that it was less than a minute for the chamber Colleen was in to lose oxygen, and I decided to test that theory by checking the data again. Look here, the logs show that Colleen was the last one to reset the system. How can that be possible unless she is the one trying to sabotage this mission? I asked him. Angela looked as pale as a ghost as the countdown continued. I waited to see if he would save the physician. It would tell me if he too was involved in this mad scheme. And then to my surprise, Colleen made a last-ditch effort to save herself. Self-destruct sequence initiated, T-minus 3 minutes. The overhead system shouted. I peered into the sealed chamber and saw a look of defiance on her face. She was going to kill us all. Quickly, I shouted, rushing toward the next ladder to reach the escape pod. This time, Angelo didn't argue with me. We reached the small capsule with less than a minute to spare. What the heck is she thinking? Angelo muttered as I sealed us off. The moment the small station would explode would also mean that we would be rocketing to the surface. I braced for the first of the detonation. Seconds later, we were hurtling toward the atmosphere. I clutched my chest as I felt heat and gravity hit us and looked toward Angelo. He still looked every bit as paranoid as before. You killed her, he said. It was either her or the entire mission going to pot, I argued. Lots of good that did. He snapped back as our escape pod shook. I couldn't have possibly known, I argued amid the piercing noise. Angelo shook his head, not convinced by my words. You were there when Jonas went out to fix the hull, and you never ate a bite of that food when Hans was poisoned. You've been playing us all along. My crewmate snarled. No, you're mistaken, don't do this, I told him. Moments later, our pod crashed in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. When assistance arrived, I was covered in blood. The last moments of that crash are known only to myself and to a dead man. But I am the one that walked out of there alive. I kept my summary for HQ short and to the point. Our mission was a failure, and the entire thing was classified, and I was relieved of duty. This is how my story ends, with my 5 other crew members dead, and no proof of the experience except my own word. And I was fine to accept that. I was. Until I saw the game. It popped up in my feed in 2018, and at first I paid little attention. And then when I saw my son acting out one of the scenes just this last summer, I couldn't help but notice the similarities. It shook me to my very core. Why, you may ask? Well, the answer's simple. Until now, I spoke to no one about the sabotage that I survived aboard that station. So how did they know? I've struggled to come up with a satisfying answer to this, and all that I can be certain of is one thing. Whatever happened on board that small station, it isn't over. There is still an imposter somewhere among us.